we don't want our work from a diversity, equity, inclusion standpoint to be a marketing ploy. We want to make sure that in the day-to-day, we're also thinking about it and we're acting on it. And so it's a day-to-day relationship. And so I would say, you can't really programatize all of that because you have to build relationships with people and be in the trenches with them. And that's really, I think, the hard work that we do.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside.
Woo!
Hello, and welcome to the Upside Podcast, the first podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Jay Klaus, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. 10X co-host himself, Eric Hornung.
Are you referring to that meme that went around like a few weeks ago?
I am, because I think that you are much more in tune with what it means than I am. I don't even understand what they're talking about. I don't know if I gave you a compliment or not just now. So enlighten me.
So the 10X meme kind of came from this thread that someone started to say, hey, what are you supposed to look for in a 10X engineer? And it was someone who does all of these things really well, but it like isn't a team player, isn't good at teaching people stuff, like doesn't care about the office politics, works erratic hours. This is what you want to look for in a 10X engineer. And all of Twitter just like dunked on it. So everyone was putting out, what is a 10X VC? What is a 10X dog? What is like all of this stuff, like making fun of the thread about 10X VCs, hate meetings and all this. So calling me a 10X co-host, I think the underlying intention was good. I think what you actually did though was make fun of me.
So you're saying somebody intended to actually say this is what a 10X engineer is, and then kind of described what is really the opposite of that?
No, I think they were describing something that is probably true. I think it was based on everything I've read on Twitter, everyone was dunking on it because it was read as more of a how-to manual, like how to find these 10X engineers, but it just came across as like very hustle porny. But I think it reflects a reality in the VC, specifically San Francisco Silicon Valley space, of like the people that get paid the most and do the most and the kind of people that people are looking for. Someone pulled up a quote by Steve Jobs and like underlined all of the adjectives that were used in the 10X rant with like Steve Jobs' response to something else and how they like matched perfectly with the kind of talent Steve Jobs was looking for. And then someone else like quoted another thing and was like, look at the comments in this one versus the comments in this how to find a 10X engineer. And it just really shows that you can say the same thing on Twitter a different way and just get absolutely owned. But you could say it a different way and just get tons of praise.
Interesting. And this is why I don't participate in memes, because I don't really get them most of the time. I'm not even sure I fully understand what the phrase dunked on means, other than I think it's another excuse for you to remind me that you used to be able to dunk a basketball.
I think that's exactly what I do. I often bring up basketball metaphors and references just so that you remember that I used to be able to dunk a basketball. I'm that nostalgic and retroactively narcissistic.
Well, speaking of basketball, today we're speaking with Molly Demarest, general manager of American Underground, which is based in the Research Triangle of Durham, Raleigh, and Chapel Hill, where we know there's lots of basketball happening, or at least I think there's lots of basketball happening.
Do you actually know if there's basketball happening there, Jay?
Can you confirm if there's basketball happening in the Durham, Raleigh, Chapel Hill area?
I would assume with Duke and UNC in that area, there's a lot of basketball always happening.
In 2010, American Underground launched on the historic American Tobacco campus. Today, American Underground connects hundreds of Triangle startups to the region's resources, thought leaders, talent, media, and entrepreneurial support systems. So this is another one of our innovation or tech hubs in a different community that we've had zero experience in so far.
Yeah, we've dove down south. We saw Florida. We talked to Memphis, Tennessee. We've gotten into New York a little bit, the Northeast, the Midwest, but we've kind of stayed away from the Carolinas and Virginia. What would you call it? The Mid-Atlantic? Is that what that's called? Or is that the South? I don't really know.
I don't know. I'm not even going to make a guess. I'm going to let the folks on Twitter let us know if that is true or not. If you guys think it's called the Mid-Atlantic, tweet at us at Upside FM and let us know that we're doing it right or we're doing it wrong. or you can email us hello@upside.fm if you have something to educate us with. Let's get into that interview with Molly right now.
Jay, if we were going to give out executive titles for Upside, which one of us would get CEO?
I would.
That was so quick. You didn't even contemplate me being CEO?
It's obvious.
What would I get?
Not co-producer.
Not co-producer. I don't think that's in the executive category. So if I was hiring for an executive position, I probably wouldn't look for co-producer in that bucket, huh?
How would you go about hiring for an executive position?
I mean, that's easy. I'd go to our friends at Integrity Power Search. They're the #1 full-stack, high-growth startup recruiting firm based between the coasts. They partner with venture capitalists, private equity groups, and CEOs to build amazing teams for the world's most disruptive companies. I mean, since 2012, they've successfully executed over 600 searches and are on track for 200 more just in 2019. Their clients have raised, collectively, over $2.5 billion in venture capital and counting.
You're not trying to replace me as a CEO, are you?
I didn't know you actually got the title. I thought this was just a hypothetical.
No, it sounds like we've made a decision. We've come to a consensus. So if you guys are looking to talk to the CEO of Upside, you can talk to me. And if you're looking to hire your own executive help, you can go to Integrity Power Search at upside.fm/integrity to find out more about how they can help you. Molly, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
On Upside, we like to start with a background of the guest. So can you tell us about the history of Molly?
History of Molly. Oh, what a complex question. So I've grown up in Durham, North Carolina. I am the oldest of 4 in my family, 4 kids, really close to my siblings, majored in accounting in undergrad, which was great experience and knowledge, but quickly realized that was not going to be my cup of tea long term. Let's see, for fun, what do? I like to box, golf, hike, big hiker, cook when I have time, and I really like Durham Conniption gin. Pretty fabulous if you haven't had it.
I'm a big gin guy, yes, and I have not had that, so I'll have to add it to my list.
It's won a ton of awards, and I mean, I'm a little bit biased because it's from the area, but I think it should be a classification all in itself. I think it should just be called conniption. You have gin, you have vodka, you have conniption, in my opinion.
What's different about it?
It's magical. I don't know. It's just, I don't know enough about how it's made. It just somehow disappears when you're drinking it, and then adds so much flavor. I'm not quite sure, but it's pretty amazing for a summer drink.
I don't like gin, but after calling something magical, I am going to have to try it next time I'm down in the area.
You should do yourself a favor.
When you graduated, did you go Big 4? Is that when you realized accounting wasn't for you, or which direction did you take this accounting degree?
So I did an audit internship in a regional firm my senior year in college, and it was kind of interesting. I mean, I learned a lot, but one of my big challenges was through college, I worked for a criminal defense firm in North Carolina, and they focused a lot on the death penalty and the Racial Justice Act. And essentially, the Racial Justice Act allows people to appeal their death penalty sentencing based on race. And as we know, there are so many systemic issues from a race standpoint all over the board, but especially in the legal system. This really started bringing to light a lot of the injustices. And so some of the work that I did was on a couple different cases, but one of the projects that I did was exploring all the murders in Durham over a 5-year span and analyzing the race of the defendant and the victim and the rate at, what essentially their sentencing process. And that really exposed me to, when you're touching these pieces of paper that you can't deny, what a jury or what a district attorney is writing on there, and you see certain things, and then you look at the process, it's like, whoa, there's no denying that the inequity is there. And so I had been through that experience, and I worked specifically on the death penalty case as well. And in addition to that case, that other research case, and then I'm doing accounting, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? I have a hard time sitting here auditing cash when there are these other issues going on. And so I graduated really feeling this tension between accounting and this whole other world. But I knew accounting would open some doors for me, and it clicked in my head. So I decided not to go the Big 4 route. I did have all the credits I needed to sit for the CPA exam, and I actually sat for it, passed 3 of the 4, missed the 4th by a point. And then it kind of had me at this point of like, why am I doing this? I'm just kind of following this path. It's not really what I want to be doing. So I put it to rest. And that was the best decision I could have made. Right out of school, I joined Fleet Feet Sports. Their corporate headquarters is here in the Triangle, and it's a specialty running retail franchise. And they have a program called CFO in a Box. And so I worked with individual franchisees across the country to look holistically at their business and how they were running it, hitting sales goals. Was it an environment where their employees wanted to grow? And then the most fun aspect of it was, how do they best engage with the community? So the consistent experience with Fleet Feet is the customer service, but you want it to reflect the community. And then I found myself with the Underground and joined the American Underground 6 years ago as the second employee. And I was hired to scale the operations and finance side. And on my first day, my boss then and now, Adam Klein, so he's no longer in the role, essentially I've taken his role, said, Molly, I want you to know that at the end of all of this, if we've only helped people that look like us, we haven't done anything. And we're not there to be a savior, but we need to think very intentionally about the systems and our approach to make sure that we're building as much of an inclusive ecosystem as possible.
I want to get into American Underground here soon, obviously, but a kind of a precursor. You mentioned, you were doing this analyzing of these different cases, and you're seeing systemic issues of injustice and realizing that you have a personal interest in being involved in reversing that. When you discovered that, how did you keep yourself from being completely overwhelmed with that fact and figuring out where you could actually engage and put your time in meaningfully?
I really wrestled with that. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still. It was a little more complex for me too, because I actually had a first cousin that was murdered. And so I think I was very aware of like what our family's experience looked like in parallel to that. And so I just, there were so many aspects that I was thinking about it. But when I looked at it, whether you believe in the death penalty or not, like that's not really the point of this. The point is it a fair and equitable process? And so I think where I really started finding my interest and focus is, how do you build systems that have enough input from different perspectives, and then there's accountability there so that people of all different backgrounds can access and then thrive within it. And so I think that's kind of how that experience and then my passion has evolved. And so when I think about running, the American Underground as an organization in this season, I want to make sure that the things that we're doing are considering those different factors and they have a really solid foundation.
When you joined American Underground 6 years ago, what was it? What was its mission and vision, and how has that changed in the last 6 years?
So when we started, the first couple of years, it was just actually run by the community. There were no employees. So we are owned by a broadcasting company locally, 4th generation. Kind of long story short, they bought the Durham Bulls. First night of the Bulls, there were 35 car break-ins, bought American Tobacco, which is now the state's largest historic renovation project. And out of that came American Underground in the basement at American Tobacco, hence the name. And the philosophy around it was really responding to the needs of the community. So they being the founders, wanted a place to work that they could afford, given the unpredictable aspects of their companies, but also be around each other. And so for the first couple years, it was just led by the community. And then Adam Klein came on, and we really started looking at it from an economic development lens. His background is economic development. So again, thinking long-term job creation, who's accessing these things, skills. So that was kind of the initial foundation, was using real estate to build density. And then we've evolved it based on the needs of the community. So then we had 1 to 4 person teams. Today we have that and a 75 person team, and we work with 100+ person teams. So we've kind of essentially evolved our offerings to be able to scale with the companies.
Why did a media organization care about this or care about economic development?
A lot of times people don't believe me when I say this, but this family really lives out, the Goodman family, giving to the community and believing in the community. And often there's a lot that they do that people have no idea that they are a part of. I'll never forget my first finance meeting. So my job was running ops and finance. And I come in there with like my balance sheet and my P&L, and Michael, one of the sons, was like, I don't really care about that. Like, I want to know who are the people that are coming through the doors? What are they needing? What kinds of companies are they building? What are their ambitions? That other stuff will come. And I think that's a really interesting approach because they get the long-term investment in community. It's not a quick, let me get a quick return and then get out. And so that's been the value from the beginning. But when I think about what we do well as a broadcasting company, it's build audiences. And when I think about our role as the American Underground, we really are building audiences for our companies. We're helping them get in front of talent. We're helping them get in front of investors, customers, and we can leverage the American Underground brand to help push them forward and really elevate them and their voice. So that I really do see that we're just kind of like a new evolution of audience development in a way.
How do you describe American Underground today then?
American Underground today, I think my response there is, wow, like we have evolved so much. And I would say we're a living, breathing organism that is constantly responding to the needs of these high growth companies. Our job is to be a couple steps ahead of them and make sure that we're thinking ahead for what they need. And they're the ones that are disrupting industries. So at the end of the day, we are in the connections business. Our job is to help our companies connect to customers, investors, employees, and other resources they need to grow their business. In terms of who we are, we support companies so through workspace, through content and programming, through connections, and we are a Google for Startups tech hub.
How would you, so I'm going to take the devil's advocate here and don't hate me for this. If someone came to you and they said, so let's say you described that and they said, oh, so you're a co-working space. How would you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, we get that question all the time. I would say, yes, we provide that as a resource to companies as one of the ways we support them. And the kinds of companies we work with are companies that are building a product or on the pathway to product at scale. So we define product as consumer packaged good, software solution, medical device, anything that you can sell. And then scale is, do they have the mindset to grow beyond 50 employees, beyond $1 million in revenue, and or could raise some sort of funding? So we're very focused on a specific kind of company. We're honest, we don't do everything well. I don't think you can. So I think traditional co-working spaces tend to be open to anybody and everyone. And what they provide in their solution is space. We are focused on high growth companies, and space is an aspect of what we provide them in addition to a lot of other things.
You said that at heart, you guys are connectors. How big is your connection or impact footprint? Like, is it really clustered in the Raleigh-Durham area, or does it expand?
So I wish I was I could just make super calculations in my head. But when I think about our network, I think about so let's say our community is 15,000 people. So on the space side, maybe we have 1,000 people coming through our doors on a daily basis. And then you expand it to the broader audience in the region, investors, other mentors and advisors, other employees that work for some of these larger tech companies. And then I think about the magnitude of their networks. Our focus and priority is to figure out how to get the information to enough of the right people so that they can leverage their networks for the community. So it's really not about, hey, we're an 11-person team and you're confined to the people that we know. This is a national and global network that you have access to right when you join the community because you can access all these people. And oftentimes founders will say one of the most valuable parts of being a part of the American Underground is the listserv, which seems kind of weird to say, but here's the thing. You are looking to hire a CTO, and you have the ability as a founder to send that out to everybody in our network without any barriers for that. And so then think about the magnitude of the network that they bring. And over 30% of our companies have found employees just in the past year just from that specific vehicle.
So it sounds like a huge part of the charter here is economic development and building up the community. And so with the companies that you choose to bring into the space, is that because that's what you believe can make that change the fastest? Or does American Underground have an investment arm to it?
So we do not take investment in the companies when they join. So, and I actually really appreciate that we made that decision in the beginning because it really allows us to be more peers and partners with the founders. And we're not it's not mixed up. Sometimes they can get pretty gray. We have invested in a few specific companies in the region through, our parent company, but that is not our primary focus here.
And so I'm interested to hear, and a lot of these questions honestly come from Eric and I, talking to different versions of economic development in different areas of the country. Is American Underground a nonprofit, or what is the model behind it?
Yeah, we get that too. So I often say we are a for-profit entity that is not in it for profit. So the for-profit entity piece allows us to move and respond really quickly to the needs of the community. And essentially, we could have a conversation today about something we want to do. And if we get enough buy-in from founders and we think it's the right move, we can move on it tomorrow. So that's one of the benefits of that. And when I say we're not in it for profit, we are in it to run a sustainable organization. But the purpose and our charge is not to generate, a huge cash cow for our parent company. I think they also see American Underground as kind of a feeding the region, one avenue for feeding the region of new ideas and new jobs. You can't necessarily measure the impact today, but the impact on that down the line is a lot greater.
When I think of Raleigh-Durham, I think of the research triangle. And here's a little fun fact. I have no idea what that actually means, but I know that it's a buzzword I'm supposed to know. So what does being in the research triangle mean for American Underground in terms of the types of companies that are involved?
Also, maybe qualify that with, what is the research triangle?
I was hoping you'd get to that because I was hoping to learn.
This is hilarious. This is actually a really big debate often. So you have a lot of different camps. You have the people that want to say they're just from Durham, or they're just focused on Durham, just Raleigh, just Chapel Hill, just Apex, just Cary, you're like hometown team. Then there's is it Raleigh-Durham? So then there's this whole debate about, well, that's the airport. So are we going to call ourselves the airport? That sounds kind of weird. And then this is not my opinion of how it sounds. I'm just giving you a sense of what people say. And then there's the triangle, which is really the anchor points in there are Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. And then there's other counties kind of within and on the outskirts of that. And then there's the Research Triangle Park, which is within the middle of Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill, which is its own area. And that's where you have Glaxo, IBM, Cisco, Lenovo, and kind of a whole different development within there. So it's kind of awkward. We tend to lean towards the triangle because it's much more encompassing. That tends to be the language that we use. And there's a group called the Research Triangle Regional Partnership. And I think this actually embodies a lot of what this region represents. It essentially is an organization that acts on behalf of 16 different counties in the triangle and different economic development groups. And they're essentially marketing the region and trying to make it easier for outside groups to enter in and get a full scope of the landscape. I'm actually on the board of this organization. We partner very closely with them. And so when I think about our focus with the American Underground, we want to be able to leverage and aggregate the voice of these high growth companies in the Triangle region, which encompasses all of that. Now, traditionally, real estate was the primary way that a company could engage with the American Underground community. But what we've just launched in the past month and a half is a virtual membership, which allows companies to have a profile, post jobs, engage in all of the community and peer groups, regardless of if they need space. K4 Connect is a great example of this. They've just raised another significant round of funding. They're based in Raleigh. They want to be a part of the American Underground community with all the other founders and employees, and they don't need space. So space should not be a determining factor for whether or not they want to participate. So this kind of virtual membership and the software side has allowed us to scale much more regionally than we could have before.
And is space the way that American Underground has generated the profits that make it sustainable?
Yeah, our primary business model historically has been through real estate. And we've had really great partners. So Self-Help Credit Union is they own two of the buildings that are our main building that we're in, and they get what we're doing. And so we've had to find, our goal has been to find partners that understand it. And then our job as a team is to operate it and run it in a way that can have startup affordable rates that allow them to scale. So we're going to be much more cost effective and flexible than you'll find with a lot of other, if we're just talking space, than a WeWork, for example.
And so you have multiple locations. How many locations do you have?
We have 5.
If I'm going to start a company in the Triangle, what type of company has the best chance of success?
We see a lot of B2B software. So I think also when you look at the corporate landscape with, IBM, Lenovo, Cisco, that's a lot of what you find here. I think a lot of the talent that comes out of those companies, they have experience in those areas. A pretty strong life science biotech industry here as well. I think that's still early on, and we don't focus as much. The American Underground specifically doesn't focus as much on companies in that space. There's a lot more complexity to those kinds of companies. But I would say primarily a B2B software, some consumer packaged goods.
How does the investment landscape look locally? Like, are there B2B SaaS and bioscience specific investors, or is this money kind of coming from outside of the region?
I would say it's a little bit of both. A lot of the funds locally, Bull City Venture Partners, Idea Fund Partners, Co-Founders Capital, they're diversified, but they definitely probably have a leaning more towards the B2B space. In terms of investment as a whole and where companies are getting it from, yeah, there's definitely a lot out of market. Though I will say one shift we're seeing a lot of is companies focusing on customers and revenue. And Archive Social is a great example of this. They just announced in May a 53 million growth equity investment round. And they took very minimal investment in the beginning. David Gardner, that's one of the partners at Co-Founders Capital, was in that. They were also in the Startup Factory, which was an accelerator that was in the underground with their first fund. And he grew, Anil, they were focused and they grew a really strong business, which allowed them to raise a different kind of equity and funding round than a normal VC round. And we're seeing a lot of that. Companies focus so much on customers. It's like, give me a customer, then an investor, and I want to be here to raise my family, grow a healthy company, recruit talent. And so it's just a much more holistic approach.
Customers are the best investors, I guess.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a Google for Startups tech hub?
So I think early on, I guess we've been a Google for Startups tech hub for about 6 years. And the initial, purpose of it is that Google said, hey, there are these communities that we're a part of or want to be a part of. We see an opportunity from I would say, entrepreneurship, job creation standpoint in communities outside of New York, Silicon Valley, and Boston. Let's see what it looks like to bring them together and essentially acknowledge us as an industry. So they selected, they had an interview process in each of the markets that they're in. And then what that looks like today is really an aggregate of resources for our companies and a network for our team, to be honest. So I think Google got ahead and said, hey, entrepreneurial support organizations are an industry in themselves, and they will continue to grow. So we're going to find the leaders in those regions, and we're going to bring them together once a year on a national level. So a month ago, I was in Detroit with all the leaders from North and South America, learning about what are they working on in their ecosystems? What are their challenges? How can we work together with each other on different things? And then once a year, they bring all the leaders from across the world together, which is such a powerful time because you're hearing from founders in South Korea and Ghana and understanding what is their entrepreneurial landscape, what's their political climate, and being able to make more connections globally. And then there have been things like Google Demo Day, where we've been able to send one founder from each of the regions out to San Francisco to pitch. And American Underground companies have actually won 2 of the 4, which has been pretty fun. But they're really here just to help us do what we do well. We also run a Black Founders Exchange program, and this will be our 4th year running it in September. Google has been our primary funder of this. They've been tremendous partners. So not only financial contribution, but they tap their whole Googler network to bring the best experts to help these companies with this week-long immersion program.
You mentioned earlier when you joined American Underground that your boss said if we only succeed at helping people like us, we've failed. You just also mentioned this Black Founders Exchange. What other programs do you have in place to help people who don't look like you?
So we are kind of looking at it in a lot of different angles. I think Black Founders Exchange is the primary one that we do. Also, if you look at the history of Durham, Black entrepreneurship is core in the soil. So in the early 1900s, there were more Black millionaires per capita than anywhere in the country. And so it's kind of part of the community and the culture. And so there are a lot of people on our team and in the community that are part of leading this program. It's not just me. We partner with groups like Code the Dream. Code the Dream started initially to support I would say, provide skill development opportunities for the immigrant and refugee community. And what that's evolved into is an education program and then a jobs program where the students come out of that, they're able to get internships, building products on real businesses, and they get paid to do it. And that launched in the underground, I think it was about 5 years ago. So that supports a large audience in the region, also touching some of the rural communities. I would say community partnerships are another big aspect of that. And then I would just say the day-to-day, thinking about how are we supporting founders in the day-to-day to get access to the things that they need and not just doing it through space. And so something we're cognizant of is we don't want to just focus on this from like a marketing, we don't want our work from a diversity, equity, inclusion standpoint to be a marketing ploy. We want to make sure that in the day-to-day, we're also thinking about it and we're acting on it. And so it's a day-to-day relationship. And so I would say, you can't really programatize all of that because you have to build relationships with people and be in the trenches with them. And that's really, I think, the hard work that we do.
So many of the cities we talk to are rooted in their pasts, and those are usually very specific pasts. So I'm from Cleveland, which is just a past of, being a mistake on the lake, all that kind of stuff, and trying to grab their future. How much of the culture in the Triangle is kind of rooted in this kind of old money South tobaccoist, American tobacco, RJ Reynolds or JR Reynolds or whatever it's called? How much is rooted in that?
Man, I mean, I'd be curious. It's a really good question. I'd be interested to see what other people think about it. I feel like when I think about what the culture is like here, there's a kind of this like we've overcome something. So there's a little bit element of, I think specifically in Durham, that we've overcome this kind of resurgence from, tobacco to tech. I mean, it's not just tech, but so it's kind of like an overcoming feeling. I think there's also this vibe of come and be who you are as you are. And so in the growth, what people really care about preserving and maintaining is the freedom to be themselves and not to have a facade on, not to be, behind a mask, act like, you're only worth something if you have a certain degree or somebody, which I think in some communities, it's very much like that. And so when I think about the culture and ethos of this community, the thing that people are fighting for is the freedom to be themselves and to grow authentically. I think that's also just the history of this region. I also think, the research institutions that we have here, specifically with Duke, UNC, and Carolina, also drive kind of a mindset of creativity and innovation that just by default comes out of research institutions. So there's a little bit of that sprinkled in there. And then a high, very high concentration of creative class. So you get a lot of people that are not only innovators in, maybe at the technology space, but they're also creative in other ways. Like, do you know what a mellophone is? Me neither. I still probably couldn't repeat back to you what it is, but I learned recently that 4 members of the American Underground community play the mellophone. We were in a room of like 50 people and 4 of those people played a mellophone. This is my point. They're incredibly complex, creative people that have a lot of factors to who they are, and people don't want to lose that.
Do you have a basketball alliance?
So I have to kill you. The whole reason my family moved to Durham when I was a young kid was for Duke. And most of my upbringing has been in the Duke community through the Duke healthcare system. Most of my friends were all connected to Duke being in Durham. So I would say I'm very partial towards Duke. I had my high school graduation in Cameron Indoor Stadium. I do think it's kind of a prettier blue, but I don't hate Carolina. And I kind of feel indifferent about NC State from a basketball standpoint.
Sorry, I had to make you make some enemies on this one. You're doing too good of a job.
That's so funny. I have been to a couple Duke UNC games at Cameron, and I used to, high schoolers follow Duke students around, so we knew where like JJ Redick would go to Taco Bell, And sorry, JJ. Saul Zion.
JJ is a big fan of the podcast, so.
Oh, come to Durham.
So you have on the homepage of your website, 31% of the companies in AU are female-led, 30% of companies are led by a person of color. Obviously, higher percentages, even better, but a lot of communities we talk to don't have even, 30% for either of those communities. And sometimes they'll talk about a pipeline issue. So for your community, do you think that, one, the pipeline issue is a myth, or two, have you taken any type of intentional steps to create a stronger pipeline for women and minorities?
Yeah, man, this is such a complex issue. So early on, when we looked at saying, how can we build the most equitable environment for a growing startup ecosystem? Our hypothesis in the beginning was the hiring trends would follow leadership. So if we focused on getting more underrepresented or misrepresented founders in the community, then the hiring trends would follow. So we do look at kind of both elements of that. And we started seeing that for sure, that the more the leadership was representative, then the hiring trends started looking differently. Employees were staying, growing in their roles. I don't buy, there's an aspect of I don't buy that it's a pipeline issue, because I do think there are founders in a lot of places. And I think a lot of times they're not where you think that they are, or no one said, hey, welcome in, like this place is for you. And so there have been multiple conversations we've had with a few women of color that have started companies that have been growing their businesses with very strong revenue, have a very scalable model, and they've been working at home because they weren't really sure where to go, and they weren't really sure they were going to be welcomed in that environment. And so we think about that in terms of what is the vibe when you walk in. Do you feel welcome? Do you feel like just the maneuvering through our space, or when you show up at an event, does it seem like a place that is for you? So we look at that a lot on the team. And we actually were just talking I'm not kidding you, like about an hour ago, I was talking with Justin and on our team, and we were just talking about what is this? Like, you do see less ideas being generated right now. I think some of that's from an economic standpoint. Be interesting to see kind of what happens in the next couple of years, like if we will go into a recession. But who are the people that are being able to work on their companies during the day? There are certain founders that are only able to work on them at night because of wherever they might be from a financial standpoint. I'm not saying that's only founders of color or only women, but these are the kinds of things that we also have to ask. When we host events, are we doing them in the evenings all the time? That can be really hard for parents, especially for women. So we actually do most of our events around 4 p.m. so that parents can come to that and we see more women participate. I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, I don't know that there is a exact answer to the question, right? You answered it insofar as I wanted to see how you were thinking about it, because it seems like you're making some real strides that other people in different communities could benefit from. And so to that end, who are some of the peer organizations that you look to learn from?
I think sometimes we just want to look around to the people that we work with and say, I had a conversation with a founder last week, and I just was like, do you feel welcomed here? Do you feel like this is a place that you can grow your company? And do your employees feel that way? So sometimes I think it can be easy just to look at other organizations and other places and totally miss just the people in front of you. And, I think about that with our team too. Is our team representative of the people in the community and the people that we want to serve? So part of this is just looking and having relationship again with the people that we're around day to day to make sure that we're responding to their needs and that we're journeying with them and them with us. From an organization standpoint, I think the Google for Startups Network has been really helpful for us. And, I think about Grand Circus in Detroit, Nashville, the Nashville Entrepreneur Center in Nashville, 1871 in Chicago. When we're together, we talk very deeply about these things. And it's helpful to hear all the nuances within the communities about what is or isn't working well there. Every community is different. But I think in general, I don't want to lose sight of just seeing the people for who they are in our space. And I think that is really the key to shifting a community.
Who are some of those companies in your space that, for those of us who are not in the region, we should keep an eye on, or you think that we might see their names?
So I'm just going to name a bunch of people that I think, and then you guys can all go look them up. Ivana and Gabby, a wife and wife team, Fathom AI. You should check them out. LoanWell, Bernard Worthy, also one of our Black Founders Exchange alumni and based in the American Underground. I would say Harold Hughes, who's also an Exchange alumni. He's based in Austin, actually, but stays very connected to this region. Bandwagon is his company. Lee Catherine Bonner, Bee Downtown. They have a scalable beekeeping model, which has been really interesting. Allison Wood, she was our CEO of the year last year, and her company is now called DaVinci Ed. They just went through a rebrand. Really proud of her and her team. And I also think of groups like Workshop. So Ben and Anna Adler, they started as a services company and looking at possibilities for expanding on the product side. So we also see a lot of those kinds of companies, and they work with companies like Google are their customers. And so you kind of see a breadth. We also have a company called IdeaBlock, which met with them last week. This was really fascinating. So when you have an idea, the patent process is very cumbersome, long, and pricey. I think it's like $60,000 a patent. And they have created a technology where essentially you get a blockchain hashtag or hash. I called it a hashtag. You get a blockchain hash that essentially marks your idea. So right now, we could just come up with an idea and you could upload it and it marks it as the non-negotiable point of reference for that specific idea. And we're actually going to do a cool event coming up with that with our founders. I could keep going.
I think that's plenty for us to look at. We've actually heard about Bee Downtown before from, I think the woman who connected us, Holly, was telling us about Bee Downtown.
Yeah, I don't serve on I don't serve on many company boards, but I have been kind of mentoring Lee Catherine since she graduated from undergrad. She actually was an intern here years ago. So I'm actually on her board and blown away at how she's evolved what you would not think of a scalable model into something that's scalable.
You talked a lot about how at American Underground you think about inclusivity. Raleigh and Durham area as an ecosystem or as cities, how much of that is in the conversation there right now? Because I think of that area as a peer city to Columbus, where I'm seated right now, and it's very much a topic of conversation all the time here.
So how does it show up in Raleigh or just between Raleigh and Durham?
I guess maybe a more eloquently phrased question, what's going on in those cities more broadly right now in 2019?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many levels to this. So from an equity and inclusion standpoint, I think you have to ask yourself, are the opportunities being created out of these startup communities, we're talking specifically startup communities, accessible to people that live in those communities? It's definitely, I'd be lying if I said that it is 100% accessible and completely equitable process. We know that's not true. However, I do think that there's a focus in the Triangle startup community, which includes Raleigh and Durham and Chapel Hill, and thinking about what are the avenues for members of those communities to get the skills that they need to get the jobs? And also, how do we start working with the youth? And so there's a big focus on youth and working with the public school system as well. So oftentimes people say, how do we know if we're successful? I don't really know if we're going to know for a while, but to me, I imagine a story where you have a middle schooler in one of the public school systems today that got exposed to a startup company, got the skills they needed because they were inspired, joined a company, got the work experience, started a company, created jobs, and kept going. So, but that's like a 20-year timeline. And I think that is definitely a philosophy from a regional level. There are a lot of infrastructure challenges. And my hope is that if we are all moving in a similar direction together, like one of our partners in Raleigh, HQ Raleigh, co-working is one of the ways that they support companies. We don't see them as a competitor. In fact, I just saw their founders like 30 minutes ago, and we're talking about how to partner better with them so that we can leverage what we're good at, leverage essentially what we're good at individually and what each other is good at so that we can elevate the region.
Molly, this has been awesome. If people want to learn more about you or American Underground, where should they go?
Come visit us at AmericanUnderground.com. And you'll see on the front page, it says your front door to this Triangle startup community. And we really mean that. We would love to hear from you. We are here to help connect you in whatever way possible. Specifically, if you're interested in being a customer, an investor, an employee of one of the companies that we're working with, we are so eager to get to know you and help connect you in the right ways. If you're moving to the area, we also would love to welcome you. As it relates to me, man, I was going to say Twitter. That's probably the best way if you want to get to know me more. But I have this like love-hate relationship with social media because I really want to be present in conversations and I have all these ideas of things I want to post. Send me a tweet. We can connect. It'll be great.
All right, Jay, we just spoke with Molly from American Underground, a new part of the country for us, man.
I like it. Add it to the forthcoming Upside tour, stopping in the Research Triangle, which I'm still a little unsure exactly what it is, but it sounds like a fun place to check out.
This upcoming Upside tour that we've been talking about for, 60 episodes now, if we actually do it, we're going to have to take off a full year of our life just to go around and see and meet all of the people that we need to see and meet on the Upside tour.
I think it would be fantastic. Shameless plug to our listeners. This is something I genuinely want to make happen. So if you want to help support us in an Upside tour, we would love to talk what organizations we may have some synergies with to co-brand, work this tour on. So I don't know, open to ideas, email us, hello@upside.fm.
And if you're a listener who has one of those old style VW Bug vans and would want to rent it to Jay and I so that we could travel around the country in it, that's always been a dream of mine. So shameless ask right there.
Love it. So Eric, before this interview, the one thing I knew about this region came from 2 years ago at South by Southwest when I somehow weaseled into a session with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And I got to spend the session pretending to be a futurist and working with Mayor Nancy McFarland of Raleigh. What I remember most from that interaction, and it was great. I mean, we had something like 20 different U.S. mayors of major cities being very open about the struggles their cities are having, and learned a lot about how much they need to consider traffic congestion and how difficult that is given how much the citizens of Raleigh love their trees.
I don't understand.
They need to expand highways, but they can't because they can't take down trees. The people will not allow it.
It seems like this could be solved with public transportation.
Possibly, but a lot of public transportation is stuff like rapid bus transit, which needs another lane, which you would have to clear trees for. Maybe juniper trees, which leads to some of this fantastic gin that Molly was talking about that I can't wait to try.
Yeah, I don't like gin, but I could go for a what's a gin drink that I would like if I don't like tonic water? A gin and juice? Is that a thing?
Yeah, maybe Negroni.
But that has Campari in it, right?
Yeah.
So I think the Campari kind of outweighs the gin.
For sure.
Maybe a Roy Rogers. Does that have gin in it? That sounds like it has gin in it.
Anything that ends in Collins. Let's get to the interview here. What stuck out to you about this conversation with Molly?
It's a unique setup compared to the other ecosystems we've talked to. Almost always it's some form of investment in the actual companies, whether it's equity-based or not. There's usually some sort of incubator accelerator component, or there's a workforce training component. But this is a advertising, broadcasting, media-based model, which is just completely different.
And their actual financial model is based a lot on real estate, which I wonder how transferable is to other communities. You know, you have two aspects here that stuck out to me. One being that this whole thing was started from basically a wealthy benefactor, it sounds like, getting it started, who has the right types of motivations and interests at heart. So that's already, though, still a little difficult to find and repeat in other communities. But the fact that it's a for-profit business that is sustainable through real estate, I also wonder what kind of opportunity exists there for other communities, because that sounds like it might work. But it seems to me, from what I hear about things like co-working, difficult model to pull off in most cities.
Yeah, I think we probably could have asked more about what the co-working boom has looked like in the last 2 to 3 years in the triangle, as I'm supposed to call it, the triangle. Because 6 years ago, I don't feel like co-working was as big of a thing, so they probably had less competition. But if it's anything like Denver, where we heard on a episode with Kate from Upslope that it went from something like 3 co-working spaces almost 5 to 6 years ago to 144 this year. I wonder if that kind of trend happened in the triangle as well.
I'm not sure, but it sounds like there are a lot of startups there in the American Underground space. They've raised $211 million since 2014. I was surprised to hear that IBM, Cisco, Lenovo are all in that area. I didn't know that. So there's a lot of knowledge workers in that space. Sounds like some real opportunity for that region to birth some, you said B2B SaaS, some healthcare, some CPG, which I would have been interested to dive in a little bit deeper on. We only have so much time here, Eric, but sounds like a region worth exploring more and getting a company on the podcast from whether it's the American Underground space or at least the area.
I agree. I think we should bring a couple on.
All right, guys. So we'd love to hear your thoughts here on this episode with Molly of American Underground. You can tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm. And if you're in the area of the triangle, and you know of a good founder or you are a founder, you can also email us hello@upside.fm. We'd love to hear more. That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's guest. So shoot us an email at hello@upside.fm or find us on Twitter @UpsideFM. We'll be back here next week at the same time talking to another founder in our quest to find upside outside of Silicon Valley. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please email us or find us on Twitter and let us know. And if you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way in helping us spread the word and continue to help bring high-quality guests to the show. Eric and I decided there were a couple things we wanted to share with you at the end of the podcast, and so here we go. Eric Hornung and Jay Klaus are the founding parties of the Upside podcast. At the time of this recording, we do not own equity or other financial interest in the companies which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinions of Duff & Phelps LLC and its affiliates, Unreal Collective LLC and its affiliates, or any entity which employ us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. We have not considered your specific financial situation nor provided any investment advice on this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Never mind, bro, that can't be matched. I'm lighting it on fire, used to run victory laps, and still I'm not even tired. It's all about the timing, yeah, that's what they say.